Right, so I think we'll get started. Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing well, and thank you for joining today's talk on 3 women artists in the Cornish Art Colony, our neighbors over in Cornish, New Hampshire. My name is Sophie Richard, and I am a very recent graduate from Smith College, where I received my BA in Art History and Archaeology. I am also a proud alum of Hanover High and have been a Norwich resident for the past 8 years, so I count myself very lucky that I'm able to come back to such a beautiful area. Before we jump into the presentation proper, I just wanted to lay out some of my expectations and goals for this talk. And that is primarily not to overwhelm with too many historical dates. I've taken quite a few art history courses that prioritize a more linear and chronological way of presenting artwork, and that is incredibly helpful when understanding how art relates to time. But I think there are different questions in this presentation that need to be addressed. Questions that I've been considering while researching, questions that I certainly don't have all the answers to. Primarily, how does art relate to gender, to domestic duties, to the influences of other artists? The 3 women we'll be discussing today had a variety of formal training and education, and so we can think about how this impacted their reception and, most importantly, their legacy today. My interest in the subject at hand started a few years ago when I took an American art survey class that covered the Gilded Age. The following summer, I volunteered at the St. Gaudens Historic Home, operated by the National Park Service, and helped with everything from giving tours, helping in the bookstore, and weeding this very beautiful garden. Here I learned about the origins of the Cornish Art Colony. Famed sculptor Augusta St. Gaudens was struggling in his New York City studio to complete a commission for a life-size bronze of Lincoln, which is now located in Chicago's Grant Park. His friend and lawyer, Charles Beeman, had been buying properties in the Cornish area, hoping to cash in on a lucrative artist scene. And he told St. Gaudens, come to New Hampshire, it's a land filled with Lincoln-shaped men. Next time we pop over to the co-op in Hanover, we'll have to keep that in mind. St. Gaudens heeded the advice and quickly fell in love with the bucolic repose and purchased the house we see today. Only after several months of research and engaging with Augustus St. Gaudens' biography did I learn anything about his wife, Augusta, and her stunted artistic career. My time in the St. Gaudens home overlapped with a temporary exhibition of her artwork, which is usually stored in the depths of the Dartmouth Library archives and away from view. I continue to be amazed that Augusta and the other 2 women I will be talking about today are unrepresented in the museums that pride themselves in having a complete collection of their husband's work. They are assuredly equals. So in this presentation, I will go beyond the success of the male artists in the Cornish Art Colony and highlight the impressive training, skill, and fortitude of their wives, asking us to think about why they remain understudied and overlooked. The Cornish art colonists were most active during the turn of the 20th century, otherwise known as the Gilded Age, a term that derives from Mark Twain and Charles Dudley Warner's co-authored book, The Gilded Age, A Tale of Today. Within the satirical novel, Twain and Warner expressed their apprehensions surrounding America's economic boom post-Civil War. The sentiment behind gilded comes still further from Shakespeare's King John, when Salisbury says, "To gild refined gold, to paint the lily, is wasteful and ridiculous excess." So there is this idea of not just wealth, but of unchecked decadence. The 3 artists we will discuss today enjoyed and reaped the benefits of their middle to upper class status, and we can conclude that their wealth did not prevent them from receiving recognition. There were several artistic movements happening at the time, but the most prevalent to our conversation is the aesthetic movement, which championed art for art's sake and design over practical need. The catalyst for this movement was the 1876 Centennial International Exhibition in Philadelphia, where Americans were confronted by the ascendancy and confidence of European art. This spurred American artists to produce original art with a nod to the successful elements of European style. The picture on the screen is the Peacock Room, designed by James McNeill Whistler and now displayed in the Smithsonian Freer Gallery in Washington, D.C. Notice the formal elements such as symmetry, which allow the art to integrate into the complete domestic space. A woman's role during the 19th century was to be confined to these domestic spaces and add to the serenity and beauty of her surroundings. These artists went beyond this typical role and reclaimed agency through productivity and creativity. The first artist, Augusta Fisher Homer, was born into a wealthy family in Roxbury, Massachusetts. Augusta had prevailing health issues since she was a child, and her family decided to send her to Europe to enjoy a warmer climate and to pursue painting. However, no individual tutor or academy would formally teach a woman, so she took it upon herself to copy the masters in the Palazzo Barberini and the Louvre. She would meet Augustus in Rome, marry, and only pursue painting as a hobby. However, she had a strong head for business and budgeting and organized and ran the finances of not only the house, but her husband's studios, homes, and materials. So dedicated to bolstering her husband's success, she created a trust to turn their home and its contents in Cornish into a museum. And I was always very appreciative of her hard work giving tours in the home because about 90 to 98% of its contents, everything from the art, the furniture, down to the kitchen implements, are original to the home. And that is a unique perspective, and the historical context is important when giving tours. So I was very grateful for her hard work. Here's an excellent example of her skill, though she received no formal training. When looking at this piece, I asked the question, what makes good art? What criteria do museums base good art on? And is your opinion of her style or technique altered once you know she is a woman? The portrait is a copy of Guido Reni's Beatrice Cenci, a Roman noblewoman who was sentenced to death after killing her abusive father in 1599. I was amazed when I saw her copy hanging above the fireplace, and still more amazed when I learned about her lack of formal training. The two portraits are near exact, and Augusta navigates the intricacies of shadow and textile with the skill of a professional. The subject matter of the work is also interesting. Whether or not Augusta's selection of the piece was based on shared sympathies surrounding the restrictions in a woman's agency, the portrait indicates that domestic or other duties diverted Augusta from painting, not a lack of skill. Here's a landscape and architectural study which Augusta completed while traveling to Belgium. She was a fearless traveler, even during her marriage, and often completed solo trips all over Europe and even to the Arctic Circle. In this painting, her use of color and blending style are reminiscent of Impressionism, showing that she was conscious of contemporary styles. Though Augusta received no formal training, her works indicate her skill and aptitude for painting. I wish that her artistic career was given a more prominent place at the St. Gaudens home, in which she played an important part in its design, upkeep, and its legacy. Hopefully when St. Gaudens, the home and the visitor center opens, hopefully soon, and you can visit again, most of the artwork in the home is Augustus St. Gaudens, is by Augustus St. Gaudens. Augustus, her husband, didn't like to display his work in the home, so that space was given over to her and friends in the Cornish Art Colony. But you can really appreciate her skill and the way it interacts and infiltrates the domestic scene. They're quite beautiful. The next artist we'll be looking at, who went beyond her husband's success and enjoyed a career of her own, is Lucia Fairchild, who is best known for her miniature portraits. Raised in the wealthy and socially prominent Fairchild family, Lucia was surrounded by artists and writers who summered and enjoyed the patronage of her stockbroker father and poet mother. One of these artists, John Singer Sargent, encouraged her to paint and pursue a career as an artist. Her parents agreed on the condition that Lucia find a suitable and wealthy husband who could fund this pursuit. She, of course, ignored their advice completely and followed her heart, marrying aspiring artist Henry Brown Fuller. Lucia was recognized for her talent while studying at the Cowles Art School in Boston and the Art Student League in New York City. She was commissioned to paint a mural for the Women's Building at the 1893 World's Columbian Exhibition in Chicago. She was just one of 6 women artists, including Mary Cassatt, to receive this commission. There was little to no money to be made in the ideal landscape of Cornish and Plainfield, so Lucia went to New York City alone to learn how to paint miniatures as a way to supplement the family income. Later, she founded the American Society of Miniature Painters, and that's truly a testament to her skill and dedication to this art. Away from her husband and 2 children, Lucia suffered recurring health issues, which were often debilitating and required surgery. She soldiered on alone, sending monthly checks back home and receiving little to no help in return from her husband. After a few successful commissions, Lucia returned to Plainfield, where she painted, modeled for other artists, and encouraged the artist children's creativity. I include this lovely portrait of Lucia's youngest, Clara, as a way to showcase her delicacy as a painter and the use of color, which I believe is heavily influenced by Mary Cassatt. These intricate blues and pinks that are complemented by the child's golden hair, they're quite lovely, and they render a very delicate scene. I'm not 100% sure if the frame is original to the work, but it really should be, because its magnitude and size emphasizes the child size and delicate vulnerability. The gold, of course, then complements the blues, and it's just a very lovely scene overall. I think it's interesting to note that another reason that I think that this is influenced by Mary Cassatt is the cropped view of the painting. And by cropped, I mean the frame in the background is cut in half. You can't see the whole painting, and that creates a very again, a very delicate, narrow focus, which indicates a mother's attention to the well-being of her child, and creates a very lovely, intimate scene. Influences are certainly wide-ranging. This portrait is very different to the other two that we saw, and it's reminiscent of James McNeill Whistler's work. He had a great appreciation for Japanese ink drawings and popularized integrating formal elements with opaque or translucent detailings. I think it's very lovely, the contrast between her skin and her hair against the billowing sleeves, the very delicate birds, the sun, the sort of mist that goes over the sun. It's quite a lovely portrait and very tangible in a way, while some elements are quite opaque and translucent. Lucia aligned her artistic aspirations with providing for her family. She left her children behind in order that the family might afford a beautiful home in Plainfield and that her husband might paint at his enjoyment. Both Augusta and Lucia show their selfless dedication to their domestic duties in two very different ways. Augusta remains unexhibited at big-name museums, while examples of Lucia's work can be found at the Smithsonian American Art Museum and the Met. Yet how is their artwork different? Why is one prioritized in the telling of American artistic achievement over the other? Some possible answers to those questions: perhaps it's Lucia's very impressive lineage, the Fairchild name, perhaps through donations, just her legacy that bought her those spots. She's also incredibly talented, and she pursued art as an artist. She had a career, and museums are most likely attracted to that, and artists who took their artwork quite seriously into the professional world. Now to our last and final artist, Maria Oki, who is best known for her detailed floral studies. Born into a wealthy, artistic New York City family, Maria was impressively trained at the Cooper Union School of Design and the Antique School of the National Academy of Fine Arts. She studied with renowned artists such as John Lafarge and William Morris Hunt, who is known for those lovely wallpaper designs. She was making a name for herself as an avant-garde thinker and one of the most promising artists of her generation. Then she met and married Thomas Wilmer Dewing, a little-known artist who would soon become famous for his ethereal depictions of women. As the wife of one of the most prominent figure painters of the day, Maria felt unable to compete with her husband, substituting her flower paintings for the figural compositions she had exhibited in her student days. At the end of her life, Dewing expressed doubt in her accomplishments and regret for what she had given up. Quote, "I have hardly touched any achievement. I dreamed of groups of figures and big landscapes, and still I see them." So you can certainly see that her first sentiment, her doubts about achieving anything, are false. These are two beautiful examples of those floral studies. The first on the left-hand side of the screen is at the Hood Museum at Dartmouth. And it's a lovely, what we would call an earthworm view. You can imagine that Maria is on her hands and knees, weeding around the gardens, perhaps playing with her children, hiding in the irises. It's a botanist view. Maria was, she excelled and enjoyed her garden at her mansion in the Cornish colony called Doveridge. She manicured and produced quite a beautiful, extensive garden. And you can tell that she spent quite a lot of time looking at the irises, their growth, their growth habits, even the way that they are pruned or the way that they react to sun, etc. She has quite a keen eye for that. I quite enjoyed the one on the right, which just is a beautiful explosion of color against this very muted green background. And I think it expresses her creativity and quite scientific eye. Oops. So I found this beautiful example of a figural scene by Maria just a few days ago. It was purchased in 2002 and is now in a private collection, so unfortunately you can't see it in a museum, but it is a rare example of a figural scene. It was completed 3 years before her death. She died in 1927, Thomas Wilmer Dewing died in 1938. So she's revisiting this subject matter that she enjoyed, or this genre that she enjoyed. It's quite mysterious. The figures, their facial features are unrecognizable, yet you can tell that they have a face, they have hands. The woman kneeling down is quite hazy. She's, in the way that I described her husband's work as ethereal, you get a similar element here. The rendering of the textiles, the dresses hanging up, is quite vibrant and tangible, and that is a great juxtaposition to the more ethereal and translucent quality of the women. It's quite beautiful and something that I think should be in a museum. I wish it was available to the public. She often assisted her husband by painting the floral elements in his work, yet received very little formal credit. This work, The Days, is a confirmed collaboration between the two and really expresses the romanticism through the delicacy and form and color, which we saw in her other two works. There is another painting where she actually signs the bottom next to her husband, but it was difficult to find. But this is an excellent example of her skill. It's quite a large painting, it's quite substantial, and her integration of her style with her husband's is quite impressive, but I think we can still appreciate it as her style. In Maria's case, we see the direct impact of social stigmas and limitations directly inhibiting her already successful career. As with Lucia and Augusta, full artistic aspirations were put on hold after marriage. The certain amount of social freedom that accompanied these women's early years was unable to continue to the same extent again. These women are often understudied, if studied at all, confined to a few lines in their husbands' biographies. I hope I was able to demonstrate and highlight their skill, and would like to bring us back to some of those questions I posed at the beginning. How does art relate to gender, to domestic duties, to the influences of other artists? How can a variety of formal training and experience be met with the same disregard in terms of representation within top museums? It is often assumed that the fault lies within the institutions where these women were trained. However, notable alums from academies and schools where Maria and Lucia studied include Childe Hassam, William Glackens, Winslow Homer, Augusta St. Gaudens, etc. Of course, classes were most likely segregated by gender, and the quality of instruction was perhaps not the same. However, Maria and Lucia both studied with renowned artists such as John Singer Sargent and William Morris Hunt. I want to leave you with the question, why do museums prioritize collecting male Gilded Age artists when their wives were just as competent and skilled? Is it a lack of audience exposure to women artists of the time? And if so, how do we right that? I'd like to thank you for listening to this talk, and I hope I've introduced you to 3 artists who you will continue to look into and study. There is a wealth of information on the Gilded Age and, of course, the artists in the Cornish Art Colony. And this is it's touching the iceberg. This is touching the tip of the iceberg about these women. There were certainly other women artists in the Cornish Art Colony, but these were the 3 that spoke to me the most. So thank you so much for listening, and I appreciate your time. I'll open it up to questions and comments. Thank you.